Welcome to Recovering Your Voice, a place where we share stories together. My name's Bonnie.
I'm Carol Ann.
And I'm Colette.
And today we have a guest on our show who faced a question of beliefs. What do you do when something that is so deep within you is challenged? A core belief that you thought you would always hang on to is now in jeopardy. What do you do about it? Our guest today is Jason. He's a pastor and he's a leader that's deeply involved in his community. And he is a close friend. And so welcome, Jason, to the show today.
Thanks, Bonnie. It's really great to be with you today. Thanks for the invitation.
Jason, what part of your story would you like to share with us and why?
Yeah, that was when I saw the questions, I was like, oh, there's so many parts to my story that have been written and are yet to be written. But as I was thinking back, I wanted to share a part of my journey that in a sense continues to be a part of my journey, but it's really a part of my story involving sort of deconstructing some of my beliefs and my worldviews and getting right down to sort of the roots of things and sort of uprooting some things. And uprooting can be a painful sort of traumatic time, but also it can be sort of a liberating time. So I guess if I'm going to sort of locate the point of my journey, it started maybe about more than 15 years ago when I was, I grew up in a Christian household, and my Christian faith has been an important part of my life and my journey. But I got to a place where I was feeling pretty discouraged and disoriented, and I just felt like throwing in the towel on my faith journey. But there was something just kept compelling me to keep going, and I ended up sort of deconstructing right down to the roots of my belief. And I realized as I went to Bible college and I learned a bunch of different beliefs from different people in a vast sort of wide community, I realized that the whole roots of my belief system were centered around like being certain, having the right beliefs, and sort of getting my life and my fulfillment from being certain, and coming to the place of realization that faith, as I understand it now, is not being certain about everything you believe. You introduced me as I'm a pastor of a church, and I'm much more comfortable these days saying, I don't know. And there are many things that I don't know, and being more secure in my honest doubts and my curiosities and not knowing. And so I guess that part of my journey continues in a sense, but about sort of maybe 8 to 10 years ago, that really came to a head where I really had to take very seriously what am I putting my trust in, what am I putting my faith in, and really sort of deconstructing this whole notion that faith is being certain about what I believe. So that's the nuts and bolts of it, the long and short of it in a nutshell, that part of my journey.
Being certain in something it gives us stability, doesn't it? It causes us to have this feeling that we're in control. So when that is kind of like, taken out of us, if it's like we're standing on a stool and the stool's been kicked out, it is disorienting, as you said. So how do you navigate that? What kind of strategies or obstacles did you face in coming through that?
Yeah, those are good analogies. It kind of felt like the rug being pulled out from under you, and almost takes the support net away. So it's a very scary time. There was a lot of fear for me, if I'm honest, and I think back, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear of, what am I going to say? Who am I going to talk to? How are people going to perceive me? Because I'm going through this process as I'm a pastor at a church, right? I'm supposed to be the answer guy. I'm supposed to be the one, sometimes the cliche is you're closest to God and you've got all the answers. And I didn't feel like that at all. I still don't, to a certain degree. And so there were a lot of it was if I'm honest, my own fears and insecurities. So there was both the inward struggle of coming to sort of a peace with, this is who I am. This is my authentic self. This is where I am on the journey. And so for me, the important thing was to surround myself with a community, with people who would give me permission to be my authentic self, to be vulnerable. And so, Bonnie, you and your husband have been some of those people in my life. So for years, every second Wednesday, sitting with a group of guys, being able to kind of bare my soul and listen, and in a safe environment. Other colleagues for me who are going through similar journey that I trust. So community, I don't think you can overstate the importance of community and healthy community, because as we all know, you can be an unhealthy community that can add to the anxiety, but finding and having the wisdom too to recognize what I can say to who and not to overspeak. There are certain environments where it's too much to share. So even getting up on a Sunday morning, I gotta be not dishonest. I want to be genuine, but recognizing, no, this isn't the place to bare my soul, and finding deeper community where I can do that. Also, some of the other obstacles were inevitably people misunderstanding or judging from afar. Sometimes the religious gatekeepers, so to speak, presume that if you're having doubts, you're backsliding and you're on a slippery slope to unbelief. And so that was and continues to be a very real obstacle as well. But for me, kind of the pivotal point in my journey was just coming to the place, and this might sound very cliche, but deeply experiencing my own sort of belovedness, to know that I am loved unconditionally, regardless of where I am on the journey, regardless of my doubts, my anxieties, my fears. That doesn't change the fact that I'm loved by my creator. I'm loved by those that know me well, my family and my trusted friends, and to just recognize and let go of, I can't control what people are perceiving about me on my journey, and just being okay with trying to be consistent, to live with integrity, honesty, and vulnerability, and just ride the waves as they come. Because I'd be lying if I say there's no more fear, anxiety, or doubts in my life, but learning to navigate those and live with a greater measure of peace on the journey.
What kind of obstacles would you face in all of this? Like, what kind of core beliefs, and what do people do when they are disturbed? What kind of things do you see as you're out there when kind of their house of cards falls down, so to speak?
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you mentioned that analogy, house of cards, and that's a good analogy, and that's an analogy that's been helpful. Maybe I'll share that briefly if I could.
Yes,
Um,
please.
and I've got a book that I want to give credit where credit is due. I first encountered this in this book here. It's called the Benefit of the Doubt: Breaking Down the Idol of Certainty, by a man by the name of Gregory Boyd. And he uses this analogy of sort of faith or a worldview being akin to a house of cards. And I love building house of cards and playing cards, even going back to my upbringing. And as we all know, when you build a house of cards, it's a very delicate process, right? And if just one card is removed, the whole house can come tumbling down. And that was kind of how it felt at that time in my life, that each card was sort of symbolic of a certain belief in my belief system, in my worldview. And if even one of those was challenged or threatened, then the whole thing could come crashing down. And that leads to a lot of insecurity, a lot of fear. And so, but it's so liberating when you can just allow that house of cards to topple down and look for a different model sort of to build your life around. And so the model I've been sort of reconstructing is not a house of cards model, but maybe more like a dartboard, where there's a sort of a series of concentric circles, and there's a little bullseye that you're trying to shoot for. Of course, those dart experts will know that the bullseye isn't the most points on the dartboard. That's where the analogy falls short. But when the target, you're trying to hit the target, and so there's different beliefs that have different sort of weight and different value. And so for me, as a Christian, Jesus is the one I try to emulate and imitate. And so that becomes sort of the bullseye for me. And that leaves a whole lot of room to explore, to be curious, room for disagreement with some of the minute details of the worldview or the Christian faith. And so abandoning that house of cards model and embracing this sort of dartboard concentric circle model, that leads to a lot of freedom. But there are a lot of obstacles. And so as I walk alongside many people who are going through similar journey, I try to listen, first of all, learn, let them share their voice and their experiences. My wife has been teaching me for many years just to kind of keep quiet and listen, and don't just try and fix or respond right away, but just listen, allow people. That's what this is all about, right? Recovering your voice, allowing people to share their voice with no response, no judgment, just listen, because part of the healing is allowing people to just share their voice unimpeded and vulnerably. And so as I do that, and then as if people invite me to give some feedback, then I can give a little bit of my story and to look for common ground. I think common ground is so important. Just find even one little level where there's a connection point that you can relate to someone and say, yeah, I don't understand every part of your journey, but here's how my journey maybe dovetails with yours. And maybe we can take this journey together, and we won't always agree, or we'll be at different points on the journey, but there's some shared sort of common humanity in spite of the obstacles. And so a lot of the obstacles that I've encountered and I've seen others encounter is that fear of judgment. Another obstacle is the temptation just to sort of burn the house down, so to speak, just burn it all down and walk away from it all, when maybe some walls in the house need to be knocked down, so to speak, but there's some things that can be preserved. It's like a house renovation project, and I'm no handyman, but sometimes when you knock down a wall or remodel a house, you got to get right down to the foundation and rebuild the structure. You don't have to destroy it all and do away with it all. So it's a delicate process, and again, the value of community can't be overstated to get through the obstacles together, because people think they're going through it alone sometimes. In my darkest moments, I'm like, oh, am I the only one who's going through this? Who can I talk to? There's a lot of sort of isolation and fear and anxiety. Those are the biggest obstacles. But to know that there are many people, I think that's hopefully what this podcast will be all about, hearing voices that encourage others to say, oh, I'm not the only one going through these struggles. There are other people out there that I can come alongside. So
This is so important in today's society, where we seem to be more pivotal in, standing by our own beliefs and, I'm right and you're wrong. How do we become the people that are able to listen and to put aside our judgments? What kind of things have you faced? What kind of issues are hot, so to speak, in your community and your outreach?
yeah, judgment is huge. And obviously I think we've all seen this in the world throughout this pandemic we're navigating. It just seems like there's so much polarization. Social media often doesn't help, because at the click of a finger you can get behind your safe computer screen and you can make your judgments from afar, and that sort of emboldens people, which is pretty discouraging at times. So I try, and sometimes I tell people, like, if you're going through this right now, just maybe steer clear of social media, or be very limited in where you are and who you're interacting with. Sometimes you have to like really tighten the circle of people that you're walking with, just to get through. And that's okay, right? And that was a big challenge for me too, because as a person in my position in leadership, I'm supposed to be the one who's caring, to lose the old Christian cliche, caring for the flock as the shepherd of this community. And I couldn't barely care for myself, let alone anybody else at different points. So just to be okay, to not be okay, and to say, I'm not okay in this season. So I need to slow down. I need to rest. I need to limit the people I'm in contact with for this season. For me, even if the triggers or the traumas come from some of the sacred cows in the faith tradition, like the Bible, right? I've actually, it's going to sound strange as a pastor, but I've actually told people, if you're being so triggered by reading the Bible right now or traumatized, then just put it aside for a season. Try and connect with God in other aspects, and hopefully you'll return to that. But thankfully, in my understanding, God can reach people and encounter people much more beyond the Bible or one particular way. There's a variety of ways that we can connect with the Creator and others. And so just being okay with exploring, being curious, curiosity. I think sometimes, I grew up, curiosity killed the cat, the old expression, right? But curiosity has done more saving than killing me. Just honoring that authentic desire to learn, to grow, to understand, to be authentically curious about people's stories, rather than going into conversations or on social media with something to tell people or teach people, take the higher ground, but really just kind of listening, learning. Oh, that's interesting. And I think if I can get people to a place where you can actually be in a posture of learning, to be good learners, to be good listeners, that's so critical, especially in this climate we find ourselves in, where most people think we've got something to say, we've got something to teach, we've got something to tell people. I want to be a good listener in this season of my life, and I want to be very curious, and that's where community comes into play too, because my curiosities can take me astray, but I need to have healthy community around me to help make sure those curiosities help me grow to be a more loving person. That's what it boils down to me. Am I growing in my capacity to love people and love God? Full stop. That's where I want to spend my life, and that's the community I surround myself in. That's the journey we want to take together.
And when we're loving people, we're also empathetic, aren't we? Like we're learning to put ourselves in the shoes of someone else. Isn't that so important?
Oh, absolutely. And just being honest with, I can never fully do that. Let's just be okay with that, right? I will never fully understand someone else's story or journey, but to the degree I'm listening and authentically coming alongside of them, again, I can try and find those points of commonality. I can try and find that common ground. I can try and enter into a relationship with a posture of humility and not trying to take the moral high ground, so to speak, but just honoring our shared humanity, right? That everybody's human, and not dehumanizing anyone's story. Or everybody's story is valid, whether or not I agree with it. It's valid because it's their story. It needs to be listened to as a fellow human being. And so I think empathy, that's the word for the year I got in 2020. I always kind of see what's a word for the year. And in 2020, it was empathy. And then this pandemic started, like, okay, yeah, we're going to need a whole lot of empathy. And I think we continue to need empathy. The world needs so much empathy and less sort of judgmentalism and self-righteousness. So.
Perhaps you've already answered this, but if you could go back and talk to your younger self, that man that was so certain about everything, what would you say to him?
You need to be a lot more humble. You don't know half as much as you think you know. No, but I think I've kind of hinted at this already, but the big one is, and I'm thinking we're recording this in the season of Advent leading up to Christmas, and those 3 words, don't be afraid. I would tell my younger self, don't be afraid. Fear can be so paralyzing and debilitating, and fear can lead to a whole lot of action or inaction that is damaging and harmful to self and others. And when I take an inventory of my life, if I'm honest, every choice that I've made or haven't made that's been unhealthy, probably 99.9% of the time, it's been because of some conscious or unconscious fear that has left me either inactive or doing things or saying things that were less than loving. And so that's a word for my younger self, and that's a word for myself today. Don't be afraid. Also, stay curious. I have 2 children, and those of us who are parents listening, just seeing this awe and wonder and sense of authentic curiosity in children, I'm always fascinated and sometimes discouraged when we grow into adulthood, sometimes we lose that sense of awe and wonder and curiosity. And for me, staying curious in the truest and best sense of the word that's helped me hold on to my faith and community. That's been a lifeline to me. And so don't be afraid, stay curious. And I'd also tell my younger self, you're going to mess up, you're going to fail, but if you're going to err, try and err on the side of love and compassion. in my worldview, oftentimes the cliche is, we get to the pearly gates in heaven someday, and if there's someone waiting there saying, sorry, you can't come in, you're just too loving and compassionate, I'll be okay with that. I'll take my chances. Not that I am, but that's the goal, right? So to err on the side of love, and let's give people the benefit of the doubt, with discernment, with boundaries, but yeah. So don't be afraid, stay curious, and chase after love and compassion in extravagance.
Great words of wisdom. Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much.
Jason, as we've been talking, and especially about the house of cards analogy, I was thinking one card that has really affected people and isolated us in a way from some in the population that we would like to reach out and still connect to. But the one card would be sexual orientation. Have you experienced that kind of isolation? And what have you struggled with to reconnect?
Yeah, so that's one of many examples. That one particular card in the house of cards might be sexual identity, sexual orientation, sexual ethics, and certainly that's a hot button issue in my world, in the Christian church, but in the population at large. That's been such a polarizing sort of topic and conversation. And I can just share personally, I can only share from my personal experiences that's been one of many cards in my house that I've had to look up close and personal, to examine, or to kind of be on a journey of personally. And even in the church and the denomination I'm part of, where we're in the midst of having sort of a deep, authentic conversation about sexual ethics. And so for me, the bottom line, again, it boils down to sort of erring on the side of love and compassion, and not being afraid, and staying curious. And so for me, I've have more people in my life now that I consider to be friends of different sexual orientation. And that was so life-giving for me, because the reality is with this issue or any issues, if I stay in my nice, neat little box where everybody thinks and looks and acts like me, that might be comfortable. But inevitably that box needs to be kind of blown up, because I need to explore and engage with people that maybe don't think, look, or act like me. And, coming to the place where I can authentically say I have friends who are gay, who are lesbian, who are bisexual, and friends that are gay, lesbian, bisexual, that some of them have different worldviews, but some of them deeply love Jesus as I do, right? And that at a time in my life back in the day, that didn't really compute. Well, how can you be gay and love Jesus, right? It's one or the other, right? But that was very naive of me as I look back, to coming to the place to see that, yeah, you can have an authentic, loving relationship, and you can be part of the LGBT community, and still live authentically, love deeply, have a faith. That's been a journey for me. And so again, that's not on the dartboard analogy. That's, sexual identity, that's not the center, that's a little bit on the periphery, but it does speak to the human person, and to not try and control someone's sexual ethics or identity. I think it comes back to control. You mentioned that very early, Bonnie. We can try and control people, when really I need to give people space to be who they are, as long as they're not dehumanizing me or others. I can affirm that people are loving and living well and whole, even if maybe they're a different sexual orientation than I am. And so that's one of many of these cards in the house of cards that I had to let topple down and sort of re-examine on a deeper level.
So, Jason, could you explain what you mean by sexual ethics?
Well, ethics, broadly speaking, are the beliefs that we hold on to, that are morals, what we believe are morally right and wrong. And so when we talk about human sexuality, across the spectrum, we might have people that hold different sets of morals: what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, as it relates to human sexuality. And so that's a broad spectrum. And I know that'll be, I know, conversations down the road on this podcast, I'm sure. But when I say sexual ethics, I'm talking about what our value system is, or our moral system that we hold on to as we look at that particular card in the house of cards as it relates to human sexuality.
Thank you. That answers that for us. And I have appreciated so much your coming and sharing today. And I believe that we would benefit in future from time to time if you are willing to come back and share with us again, possibly on a different card from the House of Cards, or even going in a different direction. But we just appreciate you as a person in our community who can speak to different perspectives than ours and help people out there who are listening to have that same no fear and curiosity, and apply that in their lives. Would you be willing to come back, Jason?
Oh, I'd be honored to come back anytime you'd have me. And it's really an honor to be here. And let me just reciprocate and say, like, I've appreciated the three of you in the community as well. I consider you to be friends and leaders in our community as well. And I'm really excited to see where these conversations go. So thank you for the invitation today and potential future invitations.
Jason, are there any final words you'd like to say to our audience today?
Yeah, I guess if I can distill it down to sort of one thing, and again, this is words for me in my past and continually as well. So I'm speaking to myself as much as anyone. It's continue to seek authentic community beyond what we might call living in an echo chamber. And an echo chamber is, you say something and you hear it echoing back. And so for me, it was getting beyond community with those who just tell me what I want to say or echo back to me what I'm believing, but people that can authentically challenge me and help me grow, give me different perspectives to get to the place where you can have a diverse community, but a community grounded in love and vulnerability. And so get out of your echo chamber. That's one thing I had to do, and that's a fearful thing to do. Read broadly, listen to people broadly. And if you can get over the fears of that, because it's a fearful thing to do, there's a lot of life to be had living in a diverse community, because we live in a diverse world, right? And everyone has something to teach us. We have a lot to learn. I have a lot to learn. I'm just getting started on this journey myself. And so, get out of the echo chamber and listen to what other people have to say. And this will be one place where I can do that, on this podcast, where I'll hear a variety of voices and stories. And I know that'll be a benefit to me and all the listeners.
Thank you, Jason, for coming on the show today and giving us a new perspective to look at those House of Cards. And thank you, viewers, for joining us and recovering your voice. Until next time. Welcome to Recovering Your Voice, a place where we share stories. My name's Bonnie, and I'm here with my cohort. Welcome to Recovering Your Voice, a place where we share stories with each other. My name's Bonnie, and I'm here with my two horses. I'm going to picture horses now. I'm sorry. Okay.
Say again now.
Can you hear us now?
It's not making a difference. Wait, maybe I should go the right direction. Okay, try again.
Can you hear us now?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you.
How's everybody doing?
We're great. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm a little chilly in my basement. My hair is getting out of control, so we're just gonna not to scare people away. Feel free to edit out whatever you think doesn't fit, or as I'm fumbling over my own words there, just make me look good.
Bonnie, clean up on aisle 5.
And 6 and 7.